The U.S. middle class, the consumer, the last saving grace of the global economy and industry is dying rapidly. Statistics now clearly show that there is a growing divide in between the rich and the poor, one which has become dangerous after the financial crisis. Prepare to watch the chaos ignite the streets into flames as the citizens realize they've lost everything. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Today we are going to get into the stock markets, the middle class, how poverty has increased and nothing is being done to resolve it. Stock markets are in the red for 2015. In fact, there are many which are in this scenario. The wealthy are capturing more and more of the overall income growth during each expansion period that we have seen over the previous few decades. This is an article out of the Washington Post. I'll cover a bit from it, essentially just trying to prove to you in this video here today that as time goes on, things are getting worse. Whenever there's a growing divide in between the rich and the poor, I assure you things are getting worse. If you look at any developing nation, you often find that there is a very, very small middle class. The developed nations, very big middle class. This is one very interesting distinction. There is more in here. I just mentioned this here. This chart that I'll show you in a second doesn't necessarily tell us anything new. We've known for some time that income inequality has risen steadily during the post-war period. But this chart is a novel way of illustrating that fact. So let's move into that right away. Don't want to take up too much of your time today. Distribution of average income growth during expansions. This dates back to essentially the post-war period. And all I'm trying to get across is that the top 10% have been taking more and more of their share of the wealth as the years go on. And then if you look at the top 1%, you have a similar situation. And then you look at the top 0.1% and it's even more. And then the richer that you are, the richer you become. Hold on to that thought for just a moment. I'll show you what Jeff Bezos from Amazon, how he's doing. But look at this here. These are the different stock markets within the US. And you're just looking at the different, as they basically move through the days. And what we will note from this is that they have, in fact, moved into the red through 2015. Yes, of course, the NASDAQ, I believe that is at the top, is up for the year. But what I'm just trying to show you is that the trend is downward. And why is that? The unemployment rate is very low now compared to where it was a few years ago. And Obama has done everything he's promised. So obviously something is not right. Oh, well, it is simply because QE4 hasn't begun yet. All right, let's look at this. You can see that when we look at this chart, repeating cycles. That's all I'm going for with this one. You can see on the left-hand side, you have that blue line heading downward. And again, the exact same cycle repeating. And this happens to be from the S&P. But how many charts do we have to see where the same trends occur? If you look at this is not exactly a very long distance chart. You're looking at it only over a few months. But take the charts that go back to the Kondratiev wave, to the Elliott or long waves, and you will see that you can't deny it. Cycles, in fact, do repeat. This is just one very small example of that. All right, out of the LA Times, the nation's middle class, long a pillar of the U.S. economy and foundation of the American dream, has shrunk to the point where no longer constitutes the majority of the adult population. This is huge news, not being discussed on the front page, But think about that. Every time, even just recently throughout the financial crisis, if you were paying attention during that time frame, you will see articles, I'm sure, that have consistently spit out the propaganda. Things are bad, but the American consumer is there to pick up the pieces. Don't worry. And they just keep repeating this over and over again. Well, of course, not the case anymore. The Pew Research Center report released Wednesday put in sharp relief the nation's increasing income divide, which I call the schism, which is certain to be a central issue in the 2016 presidential race. It also highlights how various economic and demographic forces have eroded long-held ideals about maintaining a strong majority middle class that is declining every single day. There's more in here, but I want to move on. Middle income population is shrinking. Here's the charts which support that, and you can see for yourself from 1971 to 2015, adult population by income class, things have certainly changed. Yes, there are many, many people that are considered middle class, but the amount of people that are part of the lower class has significantly jumped. And then, of course, part of the upper class too has jumped. So we have things that are definitely changing, but we need a strong middle class. That's the most important thing. The upper class, and I'm talking more of that top 10%, top 1%, they have tax loopholes. They're not paying their so-called fair share, as Warren Buffett likes to talk about, or even Emperor Obama. In my book, I talked about bailouts many times, in fact, throughout the book. And what I'm trying to quote here is, it's clear that despite 2 rounds of money printing totaling $2.3 trillion, of course, for those who don't know, the book was written prior to QE3. I said that QE3 was coming, but at the time of the writing, it was only QE1, QE2, that's totaling $2.3 trillion. And as I quote, there is no evidence that the huge inflow of money into the system basically worked. It's not a surprise. It's very clear. If you take a bunch of currency, you print it up, and then you give it to bankers or banks, and in hopes that people will come to the bank to then borrow that money, it's a completely idiotic policy. I'm not for money printing at all. But doesn't it make more sense to take that $16 trillion that you printed up, divide it between all of the citizens, and cut everyone a paycheck? That would be a massive stimulation to the economy overnight. Literally overnight, things would pick up. Now, I'm not saying that's a good idea, but that's an idea that is 1,000 times better than giving it to banks and putting it on their in their books and in their vaults. It's really, really silly. Tiny cottage on what made me the smallest plot of land in San Francisco goes on sale for a whopping $600,000. You can look at it for yourself. All I wanted to say about this is that there is a great divide. As you see, people are able to afford these tiny little houses, pay $600,000 American for them. In fact, it's not as if it's just on the market and they're seeing what they can get. They've already had 300 viewers at the property taking a look. So there are many people who can afford a great deal, and there are many who simply cannot afford much. Here is one person who could afford anything. This is Jeff Bezos. He's the biggest billionaire winner of 2015. If you talk to some people on the streets, ask them how much they made in 2015, some will say, well, I'm $30,000 richer than I was last year. Jeff Bezos, on the other hand, is $30 billion richer this year. $30 billion. There is a great divide which clearly has this chasm in between individuals like you and I that separate from individuals like Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, and Jeff Bezos. If you found this video informative, please give me a thumbs up. I also wanted to mention the fact that I'm consistently doing interviews on YouTube, and I always post them on my main YouTube channel page. So you can just type into YouTube, The Money GPS, look up the channel, and then go over there and you can see the playlists, which are in fact with different YouTube channels. I talk about different things, whether it's economics, whether it's geopolitical, and it just gives, a different tone if you want to hear some other types of information. So be sure to check that out. Last but not least, if you haven't already, you definitely want to go over to Amazon and flip through my book to see if you like it for yourself. Take care.